Tonight, inside the Uvalde massacre, the disturbing footage just released from inside the hallway of Robb Elementary. The video obtained by the Austin American-Statesman and KVUE showing the gunman inside the school. At one point, a child just feet away. The gunman then enters a classroom, and minutes later, the first responding officers arrive, but then retreat. A crowd of officers in tactical gear and with shields in the hallway for 70 minutes as the shooting that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead unfolded. Also, the explosive allegations during the January 6 hearings. The panel saying a draft tweet shows then President Trump planned a march to the Capitol that day. The committee also accusing the former president of once again trying to contact a witness. It comes as a new poll shows half of Republican voters would prefer a different candidate than Trump in 2024. But is that still enough to push him through the primaries? The deadly boat tragedy off the coast of New York City. A packed boat capsizing in the Hudson River. At least 2 people, including a 7-year-old child, killed. A commuter ferry helping pull other passengers from the water. What authorities believed happened. Deal or no deal? Americans canceling deals to buy homes at the highest rate since the start of the pandemic. Celebrity real estate broker Frederick Elkin joins Top Story Live to break down what it means for the housing market. And NASA releasing images of the universe like we've never seen before. The one and only Neil deGrasse Tyson is here in studio to explain just how significant they are. Top Story starts right now. And good evening. At first, we couldn't imagine it. And tonight, we're seeing how it happened. Shock and anger tonight in Uvalde and across the country. New footage shows the police response inside Robb Elementary as that massacre unfolded. The chilling new video obtained by the Austin American-Statesman and TV station KVUE shows the 18-year-old suspect walking the hallways with that AR-15. No one around to stop him. A child briefly enters the shot, but luckily the gunman does not see him. The surveillance video also shows the first officers respond just minutes later, but then they retreat amid gunshots as the 70 minutes roll on. More heavily armed officers, some with shields, crowd the hallway, but no one goes inside. We now know that while police stayed in that hallway, 19 children and 2 teachers were killed. Tonight, family members of 2 of those young victims join Top Story Live. We'll have that in just a few moments, but we begin with Sam Brock, who leads us off with that disturbing new footage.
After weeks of agonizing waiting, the Austin American-Statesman, along with KVUE, releasing a highly edited 4-minute compilation of videos, including never-before-seen surveillance from inside the school, outside the building, and police body cam footage, shedding more light on how the law enforcement response unfolded. The gunman walks across the parking lot and into the school at 11:33. Casually carrying a rifle and turning a corner in the hallway, a young student comes around the corner as the shooter walks down the hall. Seconds later, gunfire erupts, lasting for more than 2 minutes. The young child runs away. 3 minutes later, the first officers enter the school. As the gunfire continues, some officers approach the classrooms, while others hold back. More shots, and they retreat. 19 minutes after the gunman entered, heavily armed reinforcements arrive with ballistic shields, holding up their weapons but standing at the end of the hallway, waiting for nearly half an hour. Eventually, a unit moves in a stack formation toward the classroom door, others again holding back. 48 minutes after the gunman entered, more rounds and inaudible conversation. One officer seen getting hand sanitizer while the gunman is still a threat in the classroom. After 77 minutes, a volley of gunfire when Border Patrol officers finally breached the classroom.
Their sense of urgency did not seem to be really felt or seen in that video. Instead, we know that those 19 children and 2 teachers were inside that classroom, and it took more than an hour for them to finally breach the door.
The whole police system in Uvalde failed us.
Vincent Salazar's 4th-grade granddaughter, Layla, was killed.
What aspect of the video do you think is going to be the most painful for you, but necessary to see?
When they sat back because they got gunfire, they retreated. The officers ain't trained to retreat when they're going to do They have to save these children, and they did not do that.
The video's release follows weeks of pain and outcry from some of Uvalde's youngest community members.
I usually run into my sister in the restroom.
Like Jasmine Cazares, who lost her sister, Jackie.
I forgot to say good morning. And I think that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life. I'm doing this for you, sister.
Families trying to reconcile systemic failures and an apparent lack of answers.
The answers we don't get is why they didn't act to protect these babies.
Sam Brock joins us now. Sam, this is going to be such a tough day for those families. When you see that video, it just gets you more and more upset. I can't imagine what the families are going through right now. I do want to ask you, there was so much finger pointing lately between the Uvalde Schools District Police along with the Texas Rangers, the DPS. Have we learned anything more if one department was more to blame than another?
What was clear by looking at this video, Tom, is that within about 15 or 20 minutes of any police officer arriving on scene, it certainly was Uvalde ISD school officers and city police officers that arrived first, you start to see people with heavier gear and ballistic shields, and eventually what one can only assume are Border Patrol agents and DPS agents who are there on scene all at the same time. And the most jarring prospect, or I should say jarring really evaluation of all this, is watching them standing there with heavy gear, their rifles up, their ballistic shields up, and there's a little box that shows police body camera that's inset in real time as you're watching these men with their rifles up, and the other officers to the left of them are just standing there. They're looking at their phones, they're talking to one another, they're not taking action. And for so many parents tonight who are watching this and trying to process it, that is going to be very difficult to digest. Tom.
Sam Brock leading us off tonight here on Top Story. The families of the victims in the Uvalde shooting are speaking out and demanding accountability, as you can imagine. Tonight, we are joined by two fathers of victims. Brett Cross is father of 10-year-old Uzziah Garcia, and Javier Cazares is father of 9-year-old Jackie Cazares. They're joining us now live. First of all, to the both of you, I am so incredibly sorry for your loss. As a parent, I can't imagine what that day was like and what these weeks have been like and what today is like. Brett, you saw a little bit of that video from what I understand. What was your take on what you saw?
In regards to what? I mean, we saw it the same time that the rest of the world saw it, even though we had asked for it before from our district attorney, and to not have the audio there. We didn't need to hear our babies being massacred. It was totally uncalled for.
Javier, what are you thinking tonight, and how upset are you that this video has been released in this manner, if you will, without sort of the family seeing it first?
And that was the question. We were supposed to see it Sunday, without video. Without audio, and somehow it got leaked. And I'm going to say the name, Tommy Poliski from Austin, KVOE News. Put it out there for the world to see, and we weren't ready to see it yet.
Brett, if you can tell me, did you watch the video at all? I mean, I can't imagine what that's like, and if you'd even want to see it.
Yeah, I watched it, the whole clip that they showed. We all have, and it's heartbreaking because now we relive this every day, and now we're going to hear it, not just relive it. It's a continuous thing that all that happened by leaking it out it was just devastating for us. We're tired of seeing things after the media gets a hold of them. Nobody is telling us anything, and it's disrespectful to not just us, but our kids' memories.
Javier, I was covering the Uvalde school shooting, and I know one of the biggest problems was just trying to get what happened there, just trying to get to the truth. Tonight, there is this surveillance video. Have you learned anything new from this? Have you gained any type of perspective?
Yes, and a lot of it was embarrassing to see. People on their cell phones, texting. Another gentleman putting sanitizer in his hands. People fleeing. They're trained to go forward, not backwards.
Brett, what would you tell those officers? I mean, you can clearly see them retreating. What would you tell those officers tonight?
Y'all were cowards.
They need to give up their badge so they won't corrupt anywhere else.
Yes, we don't want them to just quit from our departments and go somewhere else and then jeopardize the lives of other children. We know who did the shooting, but we also know the officers that stayed in the hallway for over 50 minutes, 77 minutes of just sitting there idly by.
You guys are in Washington right now. Tell me what you're doing there and what you hope to accomplish with lawmakers both there and in Texas.
Well, we're invited here by a group called March 4th. They're from the survivors in Illinois shooting on July 4th. What's that is that, they were the ones that invited us out here.
To stand hand in hand with them, as we all have the same goal,
And our own community couldn't do that for us.
Brett, finally,
we want to thank.
Yeah, I hear you. Brett, finally, what's your message tonight to America? Right after, unfortunately, like I said, I was there in Uvalde, and then we ended up having to go to Highland Park as well for that July 4th parade you were just mentioning. What's your message to America tonight because of everything you've lived through?
How many more kids have to die? How many before people start standing up? You think that, oh, this doesn't happen to me or doesn't happen here or anything until it does. And it will. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We have to do something to to stop these kids dying.
Now.
Brett Cross, father of 10-year-old Usaya Garcia, and Javier Casares, father of 9-year-old Jackie Casares. Gentlemen, thank you for joining Top Story. I am so sorry for your loss, but I appreciate your candor and your courage for speaking out tonight. Okay, we are turning now to some breaking news that we're following tonight out of New York City, where at least 2 people, including a child, have died after a boat capsized in the Hudson River. New video, you see it right here. People frantically racing to save several others in the water after a boat with 12 people capsized. A jet skier and crews from a New York waterway ferry helping to pull the victims to safety. Joining us now live from that scene is Ida Siegel, a reporter for NBC New York. Ida, do we know what happened here?
Tom, that's still very much part of the investigation. The FDNY was on scene, and we asked them during the press conference how it was that this boat, an 18-foot private charter boat, capsized in the middle of the afternoon on the Hudson River. They don't know just yet, but they say the Hudson River is difficult any day of the week. Today, it was windy here in Manhattan. The water was choppy. It's also possible that might have been too many people on that boat. There were 12 on the boat at the time it capsized, and it was a 13th person, that jet skier that you mentioned. He's actually the owner of the charter boat, and he saw the boat flip over, and when he saw that, he waved down 2 local ferry captains that work for New York Waterways and begged them to help rescue people, which they did, at least some of the people, but not the 2 who were killed.
Ida, do we know how big that boat was? It seems to be a small boat to be carrying all those people, and you're right, the video shows that it was very choppy out there. I understand some witnesses have spoken out. Do we know what happened or what they've said?
The witnesses that I spoke to, Tom, were actually on a neighboring ferry and saw part of the rescue effort as it happened. I haven't spoken to anybody who saw the boat actually flip over, and that would be a key witness to find out what exactly went wrong. But again, it's an 18-foot private charter boat. There were 12 people on board. Unclear at this point if any of them were wearing life vests. Also unclear how many people are supposed to be on a boat of this size. All of that is part of the NYPD's investigation here. And they certainly want to know what happened because lots of people are out on the Hudson River and they want to make sure this sort of thing doesn't happen again.
Having grown up on boats down in South Florida, I can tell you 12 people on an 18-foot boat. That is very, very tight. Ida Siegel covering that breaking news for us. Ida, we thank you for that. We head to Washington now in the latest explosive hearing from the January 6th committee. The panel making the case that Trump issued a call to arms to his supporters and violent extremists to attack the Capitol. NBC News chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker tonight has the latest.
Tonight, the January 6th committee painting a portrait of a White House full of friction. Former President Trump ignoring his own advisors, pressing him to concede, instead barreling towards a possible constitutional crisis. And they argue pushing for a mob to come to the Capitol.
President Trump is a 76-year-old man. He is not an impressionable child. Just like everyone else in our country, he is responsible for his own actions and his own choices.
The committee, for the first time, playing video from former White House counsel Pat Cipollone's testimony, who said he agreed with former Attorney General Bill Barr there was no widespread evidence of voter fraud, and said he believed the president, having lost virtually every legal challenge, should have conceded before January 6th.
Did I believe he should concede the election at a point in time? Yes, I did. I believe Leader McConnell went onto the floor of the Senate, I believe, in mid-December and basically said, the process is done. That would be in line with my thinking on these things.
He says former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows agreed with him. The committee arguing it all came to a head at a heated December 18th meeting in the White House. Cipollone and other White House staff walking in to confront outside supporters, including attorney Sidney Powell, who were still insisting to President Trump there was election fraud.
There were people shouting at each other, hurling insults at each other.
You're asking one simple question as a general matter. Where is the evidence? So,
what response did you get?
A disregard, I would say, a general disregard for the importance of actually backing up what you say with facts.
I would have fired all of them that night and had them escorted out of the building.
The committee arguing this tweet sent that night after 1 a.m. where Mr. Trump called for a, quote, big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there, will be wild, triggered prominent far-right activists to start planning.
He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers.
Including the extremist group, the Oath Keepers.
I can tell you that they may not like to call themselves a militia, but they are. They're a violent militia.
Jason Van Tatenhove is a former spokesperson. He had already left the group before January 6th.
I think the best illustration for what the Oath Keepers are happened January 6th, when we saw that stacked military formation going up the stairs of our Capitol.
The committee says prior to January 6th, Mr. Trump reviewed a draft of a tweet that was not sent, which said the crowd would march to the Capitol after his speech.
Basically put out, come to stop the steal rally, and I felt like I needed to be down here.
The committee also calling Stephen Ayers, a former Trump supporter who showed up to hear President Trump speak and was charged with disorderly conduct for entering the Capitol.
Were you planning on going to the Capitol?
No, we didn't actually plan to go down there.
So why'd you decide to march to the Capitol?
Well, basically, the president, got everybody riled up, told everybody to head on down. So we basically were just following what he said.
There was no cross-examination of witnesses today. Republicans have slammed the January 6th panel as partisan. Every member of the committee was appointed by Speaker Pelosi. Mr. Trump today blasting the committee as the, quote, same lunatics who drove the country crazy with their lies and made up stories like Russia, Russia, Russia. Though Ayers today saying he no longer believes Mr. Trump's claims of election fraud.
Do you still believe the election was stolen?
Not so much now. With all the, all the lawsuits being shot down one after another, that was mainly what convinced me.
Afterwards, Ayers hugging a member of the Capitol Police, saying he was sorry.
Quite a moment there. Kristen Welker joins us now live in studio. Kristen, there have been a lot of allegations of witness tampering, but it sort of went to the next level today, correct?
It really did. This was a bombshell that Vice Chair Liz Cheney essentially dropped at the end of the hearing. She said that former President Trump
called one of their witnesses. She wouldn't identify that witness, and she said that it's not someone that we have heard from yet. She said the witness didn't take the call, but did alert the committee. The committee has now alerted DOJ. But taking a step back, it goes to the point that you're making, Tom, that this is a part of a broader pattern of potential witness tampering by the former president and those in his orbit. A spokesperson is responding tonight for former President Trump, saying that Cheney is basically traffics in innuendos and lies that go unchallenged and unconfirmed. But you can expect at the next hearing, which could be next week, that we will hear a lot more about this, Tom.
Yeah, I hope to get some new information. All right, Kristen Welker, great to have you in studio on Top Story.
You.
Thank you. Okay, sticking with politics now to a new poll from the New York Times and Siena College. The poll out today showing Republican voter support for a 2024 run from Donald Trump is below 50%. The poll also showing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is the most popular alternative. Vaughn Hilliard has more.
Former President Donald Trump is now eyeing his path back into the White House, a 2024 run.
And in 2024, most importantly, we are going to take back our magnificent White House. We're going to take it.
But it comes as a new poll shows even voters in his own party may be ready to move on. The New York Times Siena College poll released on Tuesday shows half of Republican voters preferring an alternative to Trump as the party's nominee in 2024.
I think Donald Trump did a lot of good for the country, but I think he's a little bit maybe too out of control.
Trump still with a sizable advantage, though noteworthy, 65% of Republicans with a college degree say they would now vote against Trump in a GOP primary. Leading in that demographic, and second to Trump overall, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who has yet to publicly engage in the fodder. He still has his re-election campaign for governor this fall.
I'm focused on 2022.
Few prominent voices in the party have suggested Trump should step aside, though Matt Schlapp, the chairman of the American Conservative Union, telling NBC's Abby Brooks today,
I think Donald Trump should run for president if he wants to. I think Ron DeSantis should run for president if he wants to. I think Josh Hawley should run for president if he wants to. I think I'm not afraid of primaries. I think primaries are very useful.
Yet to officially declare his own presidential campaign, Trump is already on the trail over the weekend in Nevada with top GOP leaders in the state, and then in Anchorage, Alaska, alongside congressional candidate Sarah Palin.
Sir, we need you back 4 more years, 4 more years, 4 more years.
And now Trump announcing a rally here in Arizona later this week, a state he narrowly lost in 2020. These rallies running parallel to the investigations into Trump. Today, the former president calling the January 6th Select Committee, quote, hacks and thugs. Consequential months ahead for Donald Trump as he plays offense to sway the American electorate back into his favor.
So you voted for Biden over Trump in 2020?
Yes.
But in 2024?
I will vote for Trump if he's going again.
75% of Republicans nationally suggest that Donald Trump was, to a certain extent, justified and that he was simply exercising his rights that were protected to him to contest the 2020 election in the lead up to January 6th. Those numbers suggest, and also off of anecdotes and conversations we have had on the ground, would suggest that Donald Trump remains not only a sympathetic, but a popular figure in this Republican Party today.
Vaughn Hilliard on the campaign trail for Top Story from Phoenix tonight. Vaughn, we thank you for that. With President Trump's 2024 run looking more and more likely, I want to bring in Matt Dowd. He was the chief strategist for the Bush-Cheney 2004 presidential campaign and is the founder of Country Over Party. He's also an NBC News analyst and one of my old friends. Matt, great to have you on Top Story. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I do want to start with that overall number. 49% of Republicans said they'd vote for him tomorrow. But I'm reading the headline of the New York Times, Matt, and I think the New York Times got this wrong. They wrote, half of GOP voters ready to leave Trump behind, poll finds. Matt, at 49%, if you think about all the people that are likely to run in the Republican primaries, that's a very strong number.
Yeah, 49% in a multi-candidate field in the GOP primary is a dominant number. That means he wins nearly every primary and caucus because you only need a plurality in the primaries and caucuses. I think people think, oh, he's supposed to be at 70 or 80. even the strongest candidates in the fields in Democrat or Republican barely ever get above 40. He's at 49, which means he clears the field as long as it's a multi-candidate field, which is what it will likely be.
And Matt, I wanted to have you on because this is a point you kept making over and over again back in 2016, actually around 2015, when people said Trump could never win. He was around, I think it was somewhere between 23%, 27%, depending on the poll, but he held on to that right throughout those primaries, and it was enough to win because so many people were running.
He didn't get above 30%, Tom, until early into the 2016 race. He didn't ever hit above 30%, and he started winning every single. And once you start winning, you win Iowa, you win New Hampshire, you win South Carolina. Once you start winning, you start building momentum. So he's in a stronger position today than he was in 2016 when he won the Republican nomination.
A lot of attention to the January 6th committee and a lot of the new information and reporting they've brought out. It's dominated a lot of the coverage out of Washington lately. Another interesting number I did want to pull. They asked people in this poll who will vote in the Republican Party how they view President Trump's actions after the 2020 election. 75% of them said he was just exercising his right to contest the election. Do you think that 75% number is revealing about what actually matters to voters right now, or does it say more about the Republican Party?
I think it says more about the Republican Party right now, because that number goes directly in line with other numbers when you ask them, did Trump do anything wrong? 75 to 80% of Republicans say no. Was Trump, telling the truth about the election? 75 to 80% of Republican primary voters said yes. It's not reflective of the general election voters, which means he's a weak candidate for the general election. But he definitely represents what the Republican Party has become today, which is a majority of people that have denied the election results from 2020. And I think that's Donald Trump is reflective of a new Republican Party.
If you were advising a rival campaign in the Republican Party right now, somebody that was going to run against Trump if Trump does run, do you think the January 6 hearings have had any effect as far as the primaries are concerned on Donald Trump?
I think if I were a candidate, if I were advising a candidate, I would say keep your head down. Don't get ahead of your skis. Stay low profile as long as you possibly can, because I think what could be developing is a question of Donald Trump's electability in a general election. And I think that's the biggest impact in the Republican primary among those voters, is voters start doubting his ability to win the general election. And if that starts happening because of the January 6th commission, then it provides an opening as long as somebody has kept their head down for this length of time.
I'll push back on that for two reasons. One, Trump has a tendency to steamroll his opponents, right? And number two, that was sort of a play that was used in 2015-16 that didn't necessarily work. So if you were going to have a strategy against President Trump in the Republican primaries, what exactly would that be? How do you think you beat him?
Well, you want to try to, if you're like, let's say you're advising DeSantis, you want to try to limit the field. So the reason why Trump was successful in 2016 is there was 10 or 11 candidates for a lengthy period of time. So you want to try to pare the field down. You want a one-on-one as quickly as possible in this. And so you want to basically raise money, show some support among Republican activists, and so you can push everybody out of the field. That, I think, is the main goal. Once you get one-on-one with Trump, as what happened in 2016, then he begins to look vulnerable. But if it's a multi-candidate field, if I were a betting person and somebody gave me Donald Trump or the entire field, I would take Donald Trump in 2024 to win the Republican primary.
Wow, that says a lot. Finally, Matt, give me three people right now you think that could give Trump a run for his money on the Republican side.
The only candidate, I could give multiple candidates. Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. Ted Cruz, I think, wants to run again. There's many other candidates. I think the money for the best challenger to Donald Trump right now is Governor DeSantis of Florida. That's who I think the money people will give to in the Republican Party. And I think the activists, because he's very aligned with Trump on many issues, that's the leading candidate. Though you never know with these things if a candidate surfaces and does well in a debate. But I think the early money would be on Governor DeSantis.
Matt Dowd for us tonight. Matt, we appreciate it. Still ahead, Americans canceling deals to buy homes at the highest rate since the start of the pandemic. So what does it mean for the housing market? A celebrity realtor joins Top Story next. And the Alabama prisoner who escaped with a corrections officer now charged in her death. But authorities say he did not fire the fatal shot. So what happened? Stay with us. All right, now to Money Talks, as home buyers are canceling deals at the highest rate since the pandemic. Is it the latest signal a turbocharged housing market could be slowing? Emily Aketa now with what it means for your money.
More home buyers are backing out of deals, and a potential sign the red-hot housing market is cooling.
Things are really shifting away from being a super strong seller's market to kind of starting this rebalance.
Nationwide, some 60,000 agreements fell through in June, according to real estate firm Redfin. That's nearly 15% of homes under contract that month, marking the highest percentage on record aside from the earliest days in the pandemic. Among the most affected areas, Las Vegas, New Orleans, and many hotspots in Florida.
Demand is definitely decreased.
Sean McLeod works in Orlando, where research shows roughly 1 in 4 buyers are calling it quits.
Not every buyer is able to purchase in this market under these conditions.
Industry experts say the canceled buyer largely falls into 2 categories: those who are using the slowing housing market to get better deals, and people who are priced out by rising mortgage rates. The 30-year fixed rate nearly doubling since January, now just under 6%. That could mean an increase of hundreds of dollars in monthly payments, especially with listing prices at record highs.
What kind of tips do you have for people who are worried about the volatile mortgage rates? The first thing to do is really understand your finances and get those finances in order. Really shop around and find a lender that's able to lock in a rate for you.
Home hunters hoping for the balance of power to shift back to the buyer. Emily Aketa, NBC News.
All right, we thank Emily for that report. With the housing market seeming to slow down or at least feel some shocks, is it an opportune time for some buyers to jump in who have been left on the sidelines by rising prices and shrinking demand? Joining Top Story tonight, a face you know, a name synonymous with real estate, Frederick Eklund. He's the founder of the Eklund Gomes team at Douglas Elliman Real Estate and author of The Sell, The Secrets of Selling Anything to Anyone. Frederick, thanks for joining Top Story tonight.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start with that top line number. Nearly 60,000 deals falling apart just in June. That according to Redfin. I know you're a deal maker. Why are these deals coming apart?
Well, I think, first of all, not to be too dramatic, the market is cooling, deals are falling through. But we have to remember that even in 2019, before the pandemic, before the lockdowns, we didn't have that great of a market. It was sort of dwindling down slowly all over the nation. And then we know what happened. 2020 came and we had a halt in the marketplace, right? But after that, I think we all forgotten, the markets went crazy. I'm smiling and I'm saying this, as a real estate broker, it was the best year, 2 years in the history of real estate. Will we ever have something like this again? I don't think so. And the low interest rate environment. So we're coming off of that is my point.
So those were the good old days, I guess you can say, even though it was just last year. What do you think's happening right now? Do you think it's rising interest rates, and do you think people are concerned about the economy?
Yeah, and that's my point. It's not like we're going into, let's say, a bad market. We're coming off these record highs. And even, let's say, New York, Q2, we still had the highest median price ever measured in New York. So we're coming off hot markets, very high velocity, crazy busy. And I think people are taking a little bit of a pause here in the summer. People are, let's say, a little exhausted almost. Certainly a lot of people traded, a lot of people bought, sold, and moved around in the country a lot in the last year and a half. So we're taking a little bit of a breather, and that's what we're seeing. Also higher inventory and then higher interest rates. And all right. My tip right now, if you're a buyer,
Yeah, no, go for it. I was going to ask you exactly that. Go for it.
No, I mean, if you're a buyer right now, it's kind of a good position to be in. Inventory is rising, and you have more, opportunities out there. I say to my buyers, try to be second in line. And what I mean by that is, you don't want to overbid and win the property. It's actually that kind of buyer's market. You want to be the second in line. So when that deal falls through, that escrow falls through, or they can't get the financing, you're second in line, and you can maybe even renegotiate your deal to even a lower value.
And then if you're selling your property, what are you advising your sellers?
Well, if you're a seller right now, You got to have patience, and a lot of people are taking off their properties, believe it or not, and then maybe bring it back in September, which I'm not sure it's that great of a strategy, because I think we're going to see even more price reductions in the fall with all that inventory coming on again. So what we're seeing in the luxury market, of course, is people are not really reducing prices, but there's a whisper campaign, if you will, around sort of the unpublished price, and people are really ready to negotiate and take, you know, a hit on the asking price.
What trends are you seeing? We have this list from CNBC about the top 10 markets that are cooling. A lot of them are in the Bay Area, and when we talked about 60,000 of those deals coming apart, almost nearly all of them were in the state of Florida. So do you see bubbles in the Bay Area and parts of California and Florida, or was just there were so much real estate transactions happening that it's just starting to cool naturally?
Yeah, I think like if you look at those particular markets, or even some of those top 10, you know, markets where it's cooling the most, those are also the markets that went too expensive too quickly. I mean, in Florida in general, some of these pockets even doubled in 1 year. So it's natural. I would still argue that the prices and even some of the velocity is higher there today than it was, you know, in the end of 2019.
So, Frederick, look into your crystal ball, your beautiful crystal ball that you probably bought at some bazaar somewhere across the world, someplace we've never even heard of. Okay, maybe in Sweden. What's one place people aren't looking at right now or talking about that you think there's prime opportunity for real estate investors or somebody looking to move and buy a new home?
You know, I'm in 13 markets, 5 states. They're all like my children, I say. But if I had to pick one, it's Texas still. And, you know, what's going on in Texas is just incredible. And if you have a chance to grab something there, you're lucky. And, you know, it reminds me of when I moved to New York in 2003, 2004, where you still have bidding wars. Inventory is coming up a little bit there still, but it's so tight. So grab something there, and you're going to do very well on your capital appreciation.
And finally, a market that scares you a little bit. Finally, a market where maybe people should stay away from.
Well, the real high end right now is having issues. Anything over 20 million in New York and Beverly Hills and LA it's a hard time, you know. So I wouldn't say stay away, because if you have a quality house and you have a unique property, there's always going to be a demand. However, you know, it's not like the good old days where you put it out and get snapped up. So patience, patience, patience. And on that note, a lot of the very wealthy with the big price points in the luxury market, they have that patience, and they're just going to wait till the next cycle, whenever that is.
Frederick, I'm glad you brought up that point, because the median home price for the top story viewer, the average top story viewer of this show, $20 million. So that is our audience right there. Frederick Eklund, we appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on. Thanks for all that advice.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
All right, when we come back here on Top Story, the child hailed a hero, a raging fire destroying a multi-million-dollar home outside of Boston. How an 11-year-old helped save everyone inside. Stay with us. All right, we are back now with Top Story's newsfeed and an update. Casey White, you may remember, that Alabama prisoner who escaped with a corrections officer, has been indicted for felony murder in connection to her death. White was taken into custody in Indiana in May after 11 days on the run. A coroner ruled Vicky White died by suicide, but Casey is now being charged with causing her death. He's also facing a capital murder charge from 2015. An investigation tonight after a massive fire destroyed a multi-million-dollar home in Massachusetts. Take a look at this. The new video shows flames ripping through this house about 20 miles outside of Boston. 3 people home at the time. The homeowner telling NBC Boston that his 11-year-old son saw the flames and alerted a painter on the 2nd floor, getting everyone out unharmed. No word yet on what caused that fire. And Google says it's investigating reports restaurants are being extorted through Google reviews. A New York Times report found restaurants across the country, including many with Michelin stars, have recently been inundated with 1-star reviews. The restaurants say they then receive a message requesting a $75 gift card to remove it. In a statement to NBC News, Google says it is working to identify the fraudulent and suspicious posts. Okay, next tonight, First Lady Jill Biden facing backlash for a remark she made about Latinos at an event in Texas. NBC's Peter Alexander has more on the comments, and tonight, her apology.
Tonight, Dr. Jill Biden learning a painful political lesson. the first First Lady to work outside the White House teaching at a Virginia community college, apologizing for a misstep Monday during a speech to the nation's largest Latino civil rights group intended to celebrate the community's diversity.
Your fight is our fight, and we will stand with you.
Making headlines for a controversial comment after fumbling the pronunciation of New York's famed bodegas.
The diversity of this community, as distinct as the bodegas of the Bronx, as beautiful as the blossoms of Miami, and as unique as the breakfast tacos here in San Antonio.
The audience cheered, but the scripted comment generated backlash on social media. One prominent Hispanic group encouraging the First Lady and her team to take time to better understand the complexities of our people and communities, adding, "We are not tacos." Dr. Biden's spokesman today tweeting the First Lady apologizes that her words conveyed anything but pure admiration and love for the Latino community. Dr. Biden has been a relentless advocate for her husband's agenda, visiting 40 states in less than 18 months. But this appearance is bringing unwanted attention to the president's closest political partner. Peter Alexander, NBC News.
All right, we thank Peter for that. For more on Biden's flub and the potential political backlash, we are joined by former Republican Congressman and NBC News political analyst Carlos Curbelo and CEO of Voto Latino and NBC News contributor Maria Teresa Kumar. Thank you both for joining Top Story tonight. So first, I want to get both of your reactions to the First Lady's comments in San Antonio. And I want to start with Maria Teresa first. Maria, can you tell me what you thought when you first heard this? And do you think the apology is enough?
You know, at the end of the day, what we wanted to look at is whether or not the words match the deeds. And did she flub? Was it imperfect? Yes. But the deeds of what this administration has done for the Latino community and Americans at large really speak to their values. When you look at the billions of dollars through the American Recovery Act, for example, that they're spending on retraining farm workers, on making sure that farm workers have fair wages. When you start looking at the billions poured into small businesses, where Latinos are one of the fastest purveyors of new businesses. When we're talking about making sure that mixed status families also get economic relief because of the pandemic, that's what we should be looking at. Words, is it imperfect? Yes, but recognizing what the administration has done for the Latino community and for the United States really speaks louder than words. And
Carlos,
those actions actually do.
Carlos, you're a Republican, but you're Hispanic as well. I mean, one of the big issues for Hispanics in either parties is we don't want to be taken for granted. How bad do you think this was, and do you think it took too long for her to come out and apologize?
Well, the problem is that it reinforces this idea that there's a disconnect between Democratic politicians, between progressives, and the U.S. Hispanic community. A lot of people in the Hispanic community feel that the Democratic Party has been patronizing the community for many years, and what a lot of Latinos want in this country is to be met wherever they are, not where the progressive base thinks they should be, not where progressive elitists think they should be. Latinos have to be met where they are. That's why Republicans are having successes recently in Latino communities, because Latinos feel like Republicans are showing up and meeting them where they're at.
So let's talk about that, Maria Teresa, if we can here. If we look back to 2020, right? Obviously, the Democrats and Joe Biden did better with Hispanics, but they lost some traction there, right? He underperformed with Latinos in states like Florida. Also, of course, because of the large Cuban-American population there and Venezuelan Americans as well. What do you think their problem was in 2020? And do you think they've taken the right steps to rectify that?
Yeah, I know that this is going to sound controversial, but they doubled down on the Latino community, and Florida is absolutely a unique example, and you mentioned it. The interesting piece about Florida is that Republican Latinos have had a history of voting in Florida, and as a result, it has curbed the anti-immigrant legislation that you see in other states. Now, DeSantis is trying to take that mantle and basically say we can join the rest of the rest of the states like Texas and like Arizona, where they have show me your paper laws. But up to this point, that hasn't been the case. Our theory at Voto Latino is that if you participate, then people actually get down to policies. In this case, what we're seeing with some Latinos emerging out of the Republican Party, even like in a state like South Florida, that is a case where it is a redrawn district. Most people recognize that there's finite resources, and the best way to invest is during a congressional race that's going to kind of come in November, because that new district that was identified in South Texas is going to be consolidated by the Democrats. And so, yes, the Florida is a very unique case, but it's also the only state where young Latinos will never overtake the older Latino vote. Texas, for example, 52% of the classrooms are Latino. Georgia, 20% of the classrooms are Latino youth. When you look at Arizona, 37% of them are Latino youth. And those young people, they believe that climate change is real. They believe that women should have access and agency over their bodies. They also believe that there should be gun reforms. And this is not Voto Latino talking. These are studies that have been done on battleground states where we find that young people and Latinos as a whole deeply believe that there should be a pathway to not only a better life, but that there is a role in government for them to attribute to that.
Maria Teresa, I find that research fascinating, but poll after poll, regardless of where you're from, shows the top issues are not social issues, they're not the environment, it's the economy. So, Carlos, I ask you, can Republicans make inroads here? And with Democrats, facing an uphill battle when it comes to the midterms here, do they have to focus more speaking about the economy, especially when they speak to Hispanic voters?
Definitely, Tom. The economy is number one when it comes to Hispanic voters, just like it's number one when it comes to the rest of the country. I remind people, Latinos came to this country seeking the opportunity to work, freedom and the opportunity to work. During the pandemic, Republicans made a lot of gains with Latinos. Why? Because it was Democrats keeping states and businesses shut down, schools closed. Latinos were impacted by those closures. I remind people, when you work at a restaurant for tips and you want to earn your way to become a manager of that restaurant, it doesn't help if that restaurant's closed, even if you're getting some help from the government while you're at home. So again, there's this growing disconnect between Democrats and Latinos. We're seeing it in the polling, and more importantly, we're seeing it in election results, not only in South Florida, but also in South Texas and in other Hispanic districts throughout the country. This is an important part of the Democratic coalition, and if they keep losing Latinos to Republicans, even if they win a majority of Republicans, it could really make it hard for Democrats to win nationally.
All right, Carlos Curbelo, Maria Teresa Kumar, we thank you as always for joining Top Story. We look forward to seeing you guys again. Coming up, the crater crime. This is a bizarre one. The American tourist falling down a volcanic crater in Italy while taking a selfie. Why he could now face criminal charges. Stay with us. All right, we are back now with Top Stories Global Watch, and the U.S. says a top ISIS leader was killed in a U.S. airstrike in northwest Syria. The strike also seriously wounding another senior Islamic State official. This is the latest action by the U.S. to stop the terror organization as various parts of Syria and Iraq see a resurgence. The strike also coming as President Biden heads to the Middle East. And an American tourist could face charges in Italy after falling into a crater while taking a selfie on the famed Mount Vesuvius. Authorities say 23-year-old Philip Carroll was hiking a forbidden trail when he dropped his phone into the nearly 1,000-foot deep crater. He then went after it before falling several meters and getting stuck. Guides were forced to rescue him using rope. He was injured and immediately taken into custody. Okay, when we come back, the spectacular images released by NASA. But what do they tell us about our universe? The one and only Neil deGrasse Tyson in the house. He's going to be live on Top Story in just moments to break it all down and get this, explain the universe to us. Stay with us. Finally tonight, a new era in astronomy. NASA releasing a full batch of images and data from the massive James Webb Space Telescope, providing a first look at the cosmic mysteries yet to be untangled by the largest and most powerful space observatory. And who better to help us untangle this tonight than America's top astrophysicist, maybe the world's top astrophysicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, joining us right here in person. Neil, thanks so much for being on Top Story.
Let's do this.
I know this is your world, and I want you to walk us through this.
It's our world.
It's our world. world. Okay, so let's start with this one right here. Talk to me about what we're looking at.
Your image is changing every 5 seconds here.
So I'm going to ask our great director, Brett, just to kind of freeze on one, and I think we'll start with one of them here.
Okay,
what are we looking at here?
This is the remnants of a star that has died. The sun will have a fate such as this, where at the end its outer layers of gas will escape into space and slowly drift away. It makes for spectacular, beautiful imagery of when this happens. And
when
these
you
are called
saw
planetary
this, what did
nebulae.
you think?
Oh, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we are seeing things better in more detail than ever before. Not only nearby, but far away.
So the red is gas, and the middle is
all this
star?
is gas.
Okay.
This is a star that has released this gas into space. But it's called a planetary nebula. It has nothing to do with planets. It's a historical error, actually. But these objects are all over the galaxy, and this is an example of what the telescope can do. All of the structures that you can see all throughout.
Let's see another one of these beautiful images that we've seen from this telescope, and you can walk us through it. This was the original. This is the original. So this was your favorite because it got a little bit of criticism. Some people were like, "This is it. This was the first one. It wasn't me." But some people.
Bring it on.
So tell me what we're looking at here.
Okay. So first, we are looking past several stars sitting on our nose in our own Milky Way galaxy. These are the spiked objects that are here. Ignore them. Okay. They're just in the way. Okay. All right. What we're actually looking towards is a galaxy cluster halfway to the edge of the universe. Okay. And it has a very strong gravitational field surrounding it. Meanwhile, galaxies behind it, these that are curved into arc shapes, they're light passing through the universe, minding its own business. It sees this distortion in the fabric of space and time, and it curves in response to it. Einstein predicted this.
There could be planets. There could be another sun,
these are entire galaxies of commensurate rank and privilege, such as what the Milky Way is.
And we can't even count them.
And this is just, and you know how big this is on the sky? If you take a grain of sand and hold it at arm's length, the patch of sky covered by the grain of sand is what you see here. So this is just stupefyingly detailed.
I want to keep feeding this. Give me another image here. We can't stop this. Come on. What else do we have here next up? Let's see what we're seeing here. This is a beautiful one. This is the Carina Nebula.
Once again, the stars that are nearby. Oh, by the way, these spikes occur because of, it's called diffraction spike. Light, as it passes through the spider mounting of the secondary mirror, diffracts around it. So there's nothing cosmic about that. It's a hardware artifact within the telescope.
And then this
is an actual gas cloud, and because the telescope is tuned for infrared, infrared has good penetration depth into gas clouds. By the way, it's the same reason why your fog lights on your car are more red and amber than blue. The more red you are into the spectrum, the deeper into clouds you can penetrate. And when you do that, you have access to places where stars are being born, as well as planetary systems around them.
Are these colors enhanced at all by NASA, or is this what the telescope is seeing?
Okay, you want to go there? We'll go there. Let's do this. Yeah. Okay, so in your eye, you have red, green, and blue RGB sensors in your retina. And what happens is, what we define as visible light is the light that comes through and is detected by these three. Those get combined into a single color image of what you see in your brain. Okay. Now, think about that. This entire telescope is tuned for the infrared. You can't see infrared. Okay. But what the telescope does is it can take images in 3 different bands, separate bands of the infrared. Then you hand it an RGB and create a color picture, which is the color you would see if your eyes could see infrared. So it's authentic and legit.
We thank you so much for joining Top Story tonight. This last one, we get 10 seconds.
This is my favorite. Okay, this is Stefan's quintet. 5 galaxies go bump in the night. I don't know if you knew that.
I thought there was no sound in space. I learned that.
Okay, they bump without sound.
We got to go. Neil deGrasse Tyson, thank you so much. This is
all
beautiful.
good. Looking forward to the future.
Thanks so much for watching Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas, New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.